Welcome back to the Coaching Clubhouse with Adrian Last.
Hello and welcome back to the Coaching Clubhouse. This is the podcast series and the place where we talk about all things growth, purpose, and the very real human side of coaching. Now, my guest today is someone who I can't wait to speak to. She's shaking up the coaching world in the best possible way. Her name is Angela Cox, and she is a Cambridge qualified master coach, one of Spear's 500 most recommended executive coaches, and the creator of Poseda 360, a coaching method that doesn't just focus on goals and mindset, but digs deep into what really holds people back. There's going to be loads that's going to resonate with you today, I'm sure. I can't wait to get into the conversation. Angela, just as a bit of background, works with leaders, entrepreneurs, and high performers who on the outside have it all together, but inside might be running on empty. Her approach helps people take the mask off, silence that inner critic, and finally stop pretending to be fine. So we're going to get into all of this, and I've got a question about Angela's podcast as well. But firstly, Angela, welcome to the Coaching Clubhouse.
Oh, it's really nice to be here. Thank you for having me, Adrian.
Now, I always like to start, Angela, with how you got to where you've got to. Tell us what your story is. How and why did you get into coaching?
Oh, good question. So I've been in coaching pretty much my whole career. It's one of those things where you've got one of those faces where people come and confide in. You end up coaching and mentoring as part of your job role. And I was in corporate and consulting for many years. And in 2016, I started a bit of a personal transformation. So always been obese and always had eating disorders, which I didn't know, but were linked to childhood experiences. And in 2016, that started to come to the fore. And I started something called the Joe Wicks Body Coach Plan, in this sort of way of trying to get myself over obesity and start to introduce healthy eating and exercise. And Joe Wicks is amazing. You've probably heard of him. He's like uber famous now. And his plan really worked for me. And as a result of that, I developed this huge community of followers that were following my journey through this weight loss plan. And at the same time, I was working in corporate still. I'd got to the top of the ladder, got that director title that, you know, we all strive for. And there was this like game of two halves going on in my life where I felt really good about the work that I was doing with my community and really not so great about the work that I was doing in corporate. And the two extremes were making it even more obvious that the version of me in corporate was not the real version of me.
Yeah.
And so as I went through this sort of transition of becoming the real me, I wrote a book of my story, and that became a bestseller before the time when you could take gymnastics on Amazon and become a bestseller. It was like, I didn't know what I was doing, but it happened. And that gave me the bravery and the courage, I suppose, to say, I've got to do something different. And so I just found myself going into work one day. I had a very fancy car, I had a huge salary, and I just said to my boss, I'm not doing this anymore, and I'm resigning. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just knew I wanted to work in something that meant that I could be me and meant that I could feel a bit more fulfilled. And so I got in my car, rang my husband on the way back from this conversation, and I said, I've just resigned, but don't worry. He was like, okay. I was like, don't worry, whatever I do next, I promise you I'm going to make the same amount of money. Didn't know how I was going to do that, but I got home, got some flip charts out, mapped out what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And coaching and mentoring kept coming through. So I just said to him that night, right, I'm going to be a coach. So as soon as my gardening leave's over, that's what I'm doing. And that's what I did. I just set up as a coach, and literally my business just skyrocketed overnight, which I think I'm quite fortunate to have that. And the community led a lot of that. And I just got into this job that I absolutely loved. And I just felt like I could be me with my Bolton accent and not pretending to drink red wine when I don't actually like red wine, and not being what everybody else wanted me to be in order to be accepted, just being me. And that freedom, I can't even put words to what that feels like. And I just started, even though I'd had this big weight loss journey, it was that decision in 2018 actually that started to create the real version of Angela, and she's been sort of developing since then.
It's really interesting. What an interesting story, and how that journey with the Joe Wicks body coach program was really the trigger for everything else that you've described that happened since. And it feels like such a brave decision to leave, you know, what was probably a very good job, paying probably very good money, to go and do the thing that you really thought that you loved doing, and that's what's proved to have happened.
Yeah, and it has been utterly transformational in so many aspects. If you like think about the old-fashioned life wheel, all of that has changed. You know, I earn more than I earned in my big posh job. I operate from a place of real authenticity, and I get this real sense of fulfillment, real fulfillment, because I'm doing work that is actually meaningful rather than hitting a budget or you know, going through another change curve in corporate, which is what used to happen all the time.
And I suppose one of the things that you talked about there with the job that you were doing, you know, and I think you talked about red wine, drinking red wine when actually you don't really like it. This is all something that I feel from having done a bit of research, Angela, is something that you talk about and are passionate about, right? Which is about, I think in your podcast series, you call the episode "Stop Pretending and Find the Real You."
Yes.
And you talk a lot about this, what you call pretending pandemic, which is such a powerful phrase. Tell us more about all of this. How does it show up with the kinds of people that you coach?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I started to coach women at crossroads, and that then went on to become leaders and executives in organizations and some entrepreneurs. But I kept seeing this pattern repeating itself, whereby there was a version of them showing up at work, and then there was a version of them that after a few sessions started to show up in my coaching room. And the version of them in the coaching chair was one that was more authentic, more real, knew what they wanted, but were afraid to ask. Were very successful, but doing something that wasn't really fulfilling. And when I started to look at the contrast between them at work and them in the chair, these four masks started to come through. So what I call the pretender masks. So it was either perfectionism, it was either people pleasing, or it was persecutor of self, or it was persecutor of others. Nobody likes to admit to that one, but we all have a bit of it in us.
Yeah.
And these masks were about almost surviving in environments where we want to be accepted. And rather than feel like we can bring the real version of us into that environment, we put on the mask of, I mustn't make a mistake, I've got to get everything right. And if I do that, I'm safe and everybody's going to like me and need me. And I'll get my salary every month. Or I'll be the one that says yes to everything, even though I'm stretched and I've not got time for my family. I'll just keep saying yes, because then everyone will like me and I'll be accepted and I'll be able to remain safe. And so these pretender masks kept appearing. And what I found was they were linked to low self-value, low self-trust, where we weren't backing ourselves. We weren't saying yes when we meant yes. We were saying no instead. And the beliefs and the values that we were carrying in the background that sometimes we didn't even have awareness of. And this whole sort of model was showing itself in front of me. And I kept thinking, well, I wonder if it's just my clients who are like this. I'm just attracting the same types of people. So then I built this survey and put this survey out more broadly, and 1,700 people completed the survey, and 97% of them related to one or all of the masks. Wow. So it was in that moment that I recognized that there was nobody being brilliant by being themselves. They were all being brilliant by masking. And there we have a problem, because if you have to be somebody else to be brilliant and accepted, where's the authenticity that all the corporates talk about? You know, where's the psychological safety? Because there isn't any. And we like to think that those are tick box exercises, and they're not. They're very individual, identity driven things. And so we've got to get under the skin of that, because I really believe that if people can be themselves, organizations will be more brilliant than they are now.
Yeah. Do you find that there's a different sort of extent to that in individuals? Do you find that some people are fully on that kind of with that pretender mask on, and some are less so?
Yeah, and I think the thing in the middle of that is self-awareness. So I think it depends how much self-development you've done and who you've done that with. And also it depends what the dynamic in your past is, because we're driven by these things. Scientifically, we call them event-specific biological markers, but I like to just call them landmines. So every experience that we've had, particularly in childhood, that has created almost like an imprint on the amygdala in your brain. So if imagine that's a landmine field.
Yeah.
You've got these little landmines that represent moments in time where you formulated a decision about how safe you were in the world. And let's say that was you when you were 7 in a classroom environment, and you were reading out loud and you made a mistake, and the teacher might have given you a look, and the class might have laughed at you. And in that moment, you made that mean that you had to get everything right from now on to avoid that feeling of humiliation, really, in that moment. And so that creates a landmine. And then the mask goes on as a result of that landmine, because you go, right, I've got to be perfect forevermore.
Yeah.
And you go through life then avoiding making mistakes, overworking, over perfecting, checking everything. But of course, authentically, we can't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about authenticity in that I'm going to show up and, share a story about myself that's real. That for me is, that's authenticity on one level. But for me, the authenticity is about being able to show the side of us that is scared, being able to show the side of us that has these landmines, and accept that they're there, and not try to overcompensate or cover them up, because it's okay to make a mistake, right? And we all know that, because it's written in all the growth mindset books, isn't it? It's okay to make a mistake, and it's all about learning. But the perfectionist pretender might say that out loud, but biologically, their body is going into fight, flight, freeze every time that landmine is triggered.
And what changes when, in your experience, people finally take that mask off?
I don't think we can take it off fully.
Okay.
So I think we've got to be real about this. I think we can, with self-awareness and with the work to identify those markers, those landmines, change some perspectives, we can take it off more than we wear it.
Yeah.
There'll always be occasions when it goes on. But I think it's about the journey of really understanding who you are, understanding that you can be accepted as the real you, and putting the work in to almost like constantly review how you are showing up.
Yeah.
So at the end of each day, having a review back, where was I authentic today and where wasn't I? And what was the trigger for me not being? And when I identify that trigger, what caused that? And how can I do it differently next time? And then we start to wear the mask less and less, and start to feel better about the real version of us, and notice that we're being accepted as that real version. And actually, in many cases, we're more successful as the real version. And that then almost gives us the self-permission to continue on the journey. But there has to be that moment in time where you make a decision that you want to do the work.
Yeah.
And most people don't make that decision, because they just stay on the hamster wheel.
Yeah, of course. I've got so many questions, Angela, to ask you about, because what I've been reading is so interesting to me, and I know it will be for our listeners as well. The first thing I found on your LinkedIn page was your headline, which says the Grow model has had its day. Why do you think this is? Because this is a typical kind of coaching technique. And how does it link to your Persida 360 model?
Yeah, so I don't teach the Grow model at Persida at all. I feel like the Grow Model's had its day because we're not in the 1980s anymore. So the way that we operate as humans has changed fundamentally. The way that we lead has changed. The way that just humans operate has changed, and we're exposed to so many more things now than we were then. So for me, looking at, where are you now? Where do you want to get to? And let's close that gap. That might have its place in an individual conversation, perhaps in a work setting. But actually, the thing that is driving the performance of the individual is their identity, the things that we were just talking about before. So just starting from where are you now and where do you want to get to isn't helpful. The person is just going to put their mask on, tell you what you want to hear, tell themselves what they think they want to hear as well, and go through the same sabotage loops that they go through each time. And they might be able to be successful with a bit of accountability that you get with a coach for a short period of time, but they will revert to type again as soon as that accountability is switched off. And so what's for me more effective is if we bring in the identity piece, we bring in the chapters of the story that have created you the way that you are, and we understand what might hold you back from getting to where you want to get to. And actually, is where you want to get to where you actually want to get to? Because what I find is when people get the mask off, the goals that they were setting for themselves are not the goals that they actually want.
Yeah.
They're the goals that they think they should want.
Mm.
And there's a big difference between those two things. And so I feel like all coaching and the future of coaching is about starting at the beginning of the story and understanding why we are like we are, what caused us to be like that, and what of that is affecting our behavior now. And from that position, we can then create the life we want. We can create the goals that we want and be more successful in the pursuit of them.
Yeah.
And so the Pasita model essentially does that. It's stop being stuck is the first step. And that's at a nervous system level, a level of subconscious self-awareness. And then it's find the real you underneath all of that nonsense that we've kind of pasted on top of ourselves. And then from that position, create the life you want. So that's where Grow Model might come in, although I still think it's quite rudimentary.
Yeah.
It would come in there. And then from that position, flourish, which would be like the positive psychology aspect of a human self-development journey.
And in simple terms, why is it that you kind of start at that point? Why is it? I mean, you intimated it a bit in an earlier answer, but if we look back at somebody's past, why is that so key to the future state?
Because every single aspect of the future state is driven by who we've become along the way. And all of our conditioning, all of our beliefs, all of our values, all of our systems, all of our funky ways of working are all made from who we've been rather than who we are becoming. So if I think back to my time in transformational coaching within an organizational setting, we always said, before you can define the future state, you have to define the current state. And that's about looking back as to how things have operated up till this point. And it's the same with humans. We've got to go back and read the initial chapters of the story to understand what the story is about, and then understand how the story might unfold. We've got to find the landmines, the biological markers, the perspectives, the beliefs, the values, understand those, in some cases change those, and align them more to who you really are.
Yeah.
And from then, your potential will not only reach what it could do if you're in traditional style coaching, but it will reach above and beyond that. And you'll be a much healthier, happier human being as a result, because you're not acting anymore. And
just going back to the Pasita 360 methods, you talked about stop being stuck, and that feels like something that is a signature of this. Yeah. What does that actually mean? How do you see this really manifesting itself in the people that you work with?
Yeah, so when I'm coaching one-to-one, let's say I've got an executive leader's walked in the door. Before I speak to them about what they want, we always speak about their life. And so I ask them to write a synopsis of their life. I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that signposts for me Any of those landmines that have happened, it signposts their perspectives, it signposts what I call their inside job, so how they see themselves in the world. Their inner critic will come through that piece of writing, and we explore that first. And from the exploration of that, the synopsis of their life, we then do some work with something called Havening techniques, which is a therapeutic modality that allows us to identify those landmines and neutralize them so that the body stops responding in that biological fight, flight, freeze way. We'll do that work, and then we'll do work to find the perspective. So what that means is you're showing up at work, you're in a meeting, and your boss is in the meeting, and your boss has just asked you to present some slides. And as you're presenting the slides, you make a mistake and he goes, oh, and does a huff. And that little version of you suddenly reverts to that classroom experience. You shut down, you shrink down, and you lose your confidence, which then exacerbates the way that your boss feels about you. And you get feedback afterwards to say you weren't any good. You go home and think about that for 5 days. What we do is we find that behavior that is causing a visceral response in you now, and we track it back to that moment when you were 7 years old that you've got no conscious awareness of, but we're able to link the two together. And we find the perspective of that version of you when you were 7, what they made that moment mean, because it's the same perspective driving your response in the meeting. And we do that work, which then gets you unstuck to then start showing up differently and getting the courage to be yourself. So that's how I started to work with my clients, having done, I mean, Adrian, I spent £130,000 on training to get to this point.
Really?
Because coach training didn't give me that. Therapy training didn't give me that. I had to do all of the training and join all the dots myself. Test it with my clients, and stop being stuck came out of lots and lots of testing. And that's what I now teach people to do in Poseda.
I mean, it's undoubtedly a lot of money, but it's a significant investment. And what you've done from the outside looking in is you've obviously come up with something by talking to lots of people, finding out what it is that we all need, and designing something which is really bespoke and, in many ways unique. And I guess there's lots of different elements from across the training that you've done. But again, you kind of looking at you and what you offer, it feels different. And that's so important, isn't it? Because we all know that there's a lot of people out there doing coaching, and there's not a lot of distinctiveness to a certain extent. And that's what I really enjoyed about kind of putting together some of these questions.
Your questions are amazing. Actually, I love receiving those through. And I guess what's really lovely for me to hear from you is that you think it's different, because I really believe it's different. Well, I know it's different, and our clients are saying that to us, those that we're teaching to coach. And the challenge that we've had is convincing the accrediting bodies of the difference. But fair play to them. They're coming on board because they haven't changed for years. But they're coming on board now with the change, and they've accredited our programs, which is really important to me from a credibility perspective. But for me, the big rub in this is that our people that we train go away and have the same results with their clients that I get with mine. So it's not an Angela effect, it's a Poseda effect. And that's what we're seeing. And I just think these ripples are the future of coaching.
Now, Angela, we all have that voice that says we're not good enough. It always happens. It happens to all of us at various points, or we're going to be found out. What's your advice for people living with imposter syndrome, or that sort of constant inner critic? How do we get around that?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm glad, Adrian, that you just said we all have it, because I think that's our first thing that we need to establish is, I think it's really easy for us as coaches to say that we all have this not good enough voice, because we know that, right? We see client after client with it. But in my experience, most people don't know that everybody else has it as well. And so I think the first thing is to acknowledge that it's a very natural thing to feel not good enough. In fact, it's a conditioned wired response. And the more that we can understand that everybody else around you that you think has got it together has not, and they are fighting this same inner battle too, I think that's the first step. I guess the second one for me is to stop talking about imposter syndrome, because I don't even believe that's a thing. Again, I would bring it back to natural self-doubt. That is all we're experiencing, is natural self-doubt that is there to try to protect you from, you know, putting yourself in harm's way. And what we have to be able to do is settle our nervous system down by saying, I'm not in harm's way. I'm okay. I've got this. Let your adult control that little girl or little boy. And just settle yourself by knowing everybody else is going through it too. It's completely natural, but I can override it if I want to. And the threat that we believe is there is not there.
You've spent thousands of hours, Angela, sitting across from people who want to change. Is there one story of transformation that's really stayed with you, something that kind of captures what your work is all about?
Yeah, there is actually. Obviously, I can't mention the person's name, but there's a person who came to me right at the start when I first started coaching, one of my first ever clients, so 2018. And I had my story, so that's quite an interesting thing that happens to new coaches. The universe tends to send you people who are a reflection of you. You got to learn about yourself that way. So she was very much like a mirror of me, and I had to make sure that I didn't take her on my journey. And what's been really wonderful watching her is how she has gone through this process of getting unstuck and dealing with the things that have been holding her back behaviorally, really getting under the skin of what she wanted rather than what her mum and dad wanted for her, or what her bosses want for her. Taking an incredibly brave step to leave a really well-paid job in technology. You know, she was right at the top of the organization and took the step to leave, established herself as a self-employed coach. So followed me on that journey as well. She's trained with us at Persida. But now I think is the real brave thing is she is going out and she is challenging an industry. It's actually the ADHD industry around how they approach ADHD coaching. And talking about the fact that it's not just executive functioning, we need to do the nervous system bit as well. So she's blending Persida 360 style with ADHD style. And she wouldn't have done any of that had she not made a decision to come and sit in that chair in 2018 and recognize she needed to get the mask off. And I just think the ripple effect, the personal ripple effect, when you make a brave decision that you don't want to just carry on the way you've always been, where that can lead to, the opportunities are endless. And she, for me, is like the ideal person to look at to say what could happen if you just make that brave decision.
Yeah. And is she seeing really tangible kind of results from that, from what she's done there?
Yeah. I think she feels a bit like I do, where it's quite scary when you're going out and looking at an industry that's quite well established and saying, here, let's do this differently, because you stand on that kind of the stage, if you like, and people throw the arrows at you because it's so different to what they know, and everyone's scared of it being different. So it's quite a lonely place, which is nice that she and I have each other. It's quite a lonely place, but it's also so necessary for people to put themselves out in that way, because you can make a change. You can turn that ship around if you're brave enough. And I think she's got everything that she needs to do that. It's just continuing to take those brave steps every day.
Yeah. And that feels like a really nice way to end this podcast, even though I've got many, many other questions, which you're aware of because you've seen my notes. But I think the thing you said there about, you know, you can change, you can turn the ship around, you know, and the word brave, we've all got that in us, and it's making that step, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just one decision. That's all it takes. One decision.
Yeah. Fascinating. Before we go, Angela, tell us where our listeners can find out more about you, and also to see your latest social content and to listen to your podcast as well.
Oh, blimey. So Persida 360 is my organization, and I'm on LinkedIn under Angela Cox, and we have a Persida 360 page as well. I'm always posting. You'll be sick of me, I'm sure, if you follow me on LinkedIn. The podcast is called the Leader Unmasked podcast, and obviously I'm talking to leaders about their unmasking experience. So you can hear from real people who've been through the process and what that's meant for them in their life. And we're just really accessible at Persida. We have this thing called green blood. Once you're part of the community, you've got green blood running through your veins. We just take care of people because that's really important to me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Angela, again for joining me, and best of luck. Hopefully I can entice you back at some point to ask you the remaining questions that I didn't get time to ask. But I really wish you all the best with it. I think it's absolutely brilliant what you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Adrian. Loved it.
Thanks again to Angela. That was such a brilliant chat. I hope you enjoyed it. I literally could have talked to Angela all day. I think you got that impression. What I love about her approach is that it's real, right? It's not about pretending everything's fine or just setting more goals. I've listened to a lot of her podcast episodes while I've been out walking the dog. You can listen to it anywhere. It's really compelling and it's easy to listen to. I put the links to the podcast in the show notes, so please do check it out. And if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe to the Coaching Clubhouse wherever you get your podcasts, and you can see the video version on YouTube as well. Subscribe there and maybe share it with someone who you think needs to hear it today. I'll be back very soon with more new episodes and more brilliant guests just like Angela. Join me for that if you can. And until next time, I'll see you very soon. Take care of yourselves.
The Coaching Clubhouse is produced by Adrian Last Coaching. Discover more on the website at adrianlast.co.uk.